There's a crisis in the White House.
What's the crisis?
And the president's top advisors have been called together.
Oh, jeez.
The sexual misconduct occurred inside the Oval Office. With the election only days away, how much will this scandal affect the outcome?
The president spent the weekend pressing the flash. He wasn't campaigning, he was dating, actually.
Now, Washington's top spin doctor
We can distract the press for 11 days till the election. I think we got a chance.
has an idea,
We can't afford a war.
We're gonna have the appearance of a war.
but he can't pull it off without Hollywood's top producer.
Do I know you?
We have some mutual friends in Washington.
Why come to me?
We want you to produce.
You want me to produce your war?
Not a war, it's a pageant. We need a theme, a song, some visuals. We need, it's a pageant.
New Line Cinema presents
How close are you to this?
What do you want the kid to say?
all the spectacle,
I know we're all concerned for the president.
I know we're all concerned for the president.
I know that we are all concerned for the president.
He didn't sell the line.
all the drama,
The president's gonna go to war with Albania in about 30 minutes.
Albania's hard to ride.
These are chips.
We need it for the arm position on the string. It'll be a kitten. We'll punch it in later, right?
and all the effects of real war
Okay, put the village behind her.
Give me some sound of screaming.
without the casualties.
America has seldom witnessed a more poignant picture of
They used the same process with the last Schwarzenegger movie.
You're the man.
Albania, Albania.
That rhymes.
I can't believe that we forgot a hero.
It was like we sent him the Christmas card and we left out the what do you call it?
Fruitcake.
There you go.
Sergeant Schumann, if I may, welcome to history.
How are you?
Anybody want a beer? Because I could party.
When it's cooking, it's cooking.
From Academy Award-winning director Barry Levinson
When this goes national, I get to put it on my resume.
Actually, no.
What could they do to me?
Take him home to your house and kill you.
Academy Award winner Dustin Hoffman,
This is politics at its finest.
Academy Award winner Robert De Niro,
How would you like an ambassadorship?
That's my payoff. Hell, I just do it for a story to
Oh,
tell.
no, you couldn't tell anybody.
Listen, I'm just kidding.
No, you couldn't tell.
No, it's just it's a pageant.
It's a pageant. That's what it is.
Wag the Dog.
When the fit hits the shan, somebody's gonna have to stay after school.
Hello everyone and welcome to another Philosophy Film Club conversation. Today I am joined by Gabriel Scheare, who so kindly accepted my invitation to the show. Gabriel grew up in Canada, but a few years back he moved to Chile, where he's now working on the development of a community for entrepreneurs and expats. To know more about him, you can visit his blog at shrugout.liberty.me, or you can follow his community project as it develops at fortgalt.com. If you would like to connect with him directly, then you can find him on Facebook at facebook.com/Scheare. Thank you, Gabriel, for joining me today. It is a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Gabriel, you picked Wag the Dog, a very interesting but also a very funny movie that we will take apart and analyze today. And in case some of our listeners haven't seen it yet, I strongly recommend watching it. Wag the Dog came out in 1997, and it's an incredibly witty comedy directed by Barry Levinson, also known for having directed Good Morning Vietnam and Rain Man. The movie has a fantastic cast with Robert De Niro and Dustin Hoffman as central characters, but also Woody Harrelson, Dennis Leary, Willie Nelson, and Anne Hesh as supporting characters. Wag the Dog is based on the book American Hero by Larry Bainhart, and it takes a look at the symbiotic relationship between politics and the media, and at the power of mass manipulation that results from it. The movie is about a US president that gets caught in a sex scandal just 11 days before elections. Enter Robert De Niro, a spin doctor who works for the presidential re-election campaign. His solution to the problem? Create a situation that will distract the voters from the president's scandalous affairs. Since the most efficient distractions seem to always revolve around some sort of a national threat, his solution is to orchestrate a fake war and to sell it to the American people with the help of a Hollywood director. Enter Dustin Hoffman, a narcissistic, self-absorbed film genius who will help orchestrate the greatest war that ever existed and whip the people into a frenzy, creating a huge wave of patriotism that, of course, will make everyone stand behind the president, no matter what. An interesting fact, the book American Hero was written in 1993 and was inspired by the way in which the first Gulf War was presented, or should I better say, sold to the American people. Larry Bainhart, the author of the book, started to notice how the mass media mixed fiction with reality, and he wrote this book with the intention of doing the exact opposite. He wanted to mix reality with fiction. Just so you can get an idea of why and how the book was written, I will read here the opening statement of the book. There are those who feel that fact and fiction are significantly less distinguishable than what they used to seem to be. They might say, as ABC television did in its introduction to the heroes of the Desert Storm, tonight's film is based on true stories and interweaves news footage and dramatizations with actors and actual participants. To achieve realism, no distinction is made among these elements. Robert De Niro picked the book and gave it to Dustin Hoffman, apparently. And then Dustin Hoffman brought David Levinson in on the project. But by this time, Clinton, not Bush Sr., was in the Oval Office. The Monica Lewinsky scandal happened a year after the movie came out. Somehow the producers were able to predict that one of the most likely scandals of the Clinton administration will be sex. So they made that the launching point of the film. So, Gabriel, this is a movie made under the Clinton administration, based on a book written under the Bush Sr. administration, but its message seems to be evergreen. It applies so well to the administration of George W., and boy, oh boy, does it apply to Obama's. It seems that neither time nor elections can change the relationship between American politics and the government whore, commonly known as, the mass media. I was curious to know, when did you first see this movie and what kind of impact did it have on you at that time compared to the way you might be interpreting it today?
Oh man, I saw it when I was in my late teens, when I was going through my angriest, most rebellious, most disillusioned phase of all. The timing was great in that sense because I watched it and was like, damn, somebody gets it. And I mean, now, if somebody were to make a version of this movie or something similar to it, I mean, we have a lot of similar movies now that it looks at the George Bush era. Like there's a movie called War, Inc. that's sort of a comedic interpretation of how Halliburton gets to go in and clean up all of the pieces after it blows things up and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So people are kind of used to that cynical perspective now. But if you think back to just as Clinton was getting into office, that wasn't really a big deal at that point. I mean, Nixon had kind of shattered people's faith for a brief moment, but the general atmosphere was so different back then. And the fact that the Monica Lewinsky scandal broke and then the war in Kosovo took place just afterwards, like Kosovo and Albania, which is used in this movie, they're so close to each other. It's almost it's almost like Bill Clinton watched the movie and said, "Hey, I want to do that."
I know. Isn't that weird? The movie seems to have predicted a lot of things that happened after the movie came out. Is this genius, or what do you think?
I think it's a combination of things. I mean, people who knew what Bill Clinton was like before he got into office, I mean, to predict that he would find himself in a sex scandal was not a leap. He kind of had a bit of a reputation for that sort of thing.
Yeah, he kind of had it coming. But why I'm talking about this is this movie reminded me very much, of course, of 9/11, when the falling towers were shown to us over and over and over again to spark more and more outrage and to prepare people for war. You know, the outrage porn continued for years, building up hate and bloodthirst and preparing the masses for the invasion of Iraq. And it's really interesting how the movie depicts the details that are used in this mass manipulation of the media, like, for example, the white cat, the facial features of the girl, and especially words like old shoe, to invoke an emotional reaction. And in the aftermath of 9/11, we have words like terrorism, terrorists, evil terrorists, axis of evil, weapons of mass destruction, were repeated over and over again. And another perfect example of these emotional cues is the very famous line that stood at the base of the buildup to the Iraq War. We don't want the smoking gun to be in the shape of a mushroom cloud.
Yeah. I mean, there's a great spot in the movie where the film producer, he's explaining how all of this works. He says, politics is theater. And Robert's character was saying, like, during the Gulf War, the image that stuck in people's minds was that shot of the bomb falling down that air vent, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're saying, like, a shot like that is so easy to fake. You don't know if that actually happened.
Mm-hmm.
And yet with that easily faked image, everybody bought that war. So then the question comes up, what else is easily sold with a simple trick? I mean, there's people that call out shifty looking photos from the moon landing and say that could have been faked, or it gets those wheels in your head rolling, trying to ask questions like, what else am I being lied to?
Yeah. Coming back to the media and how it spins the wheels of the American people and how the movie portrayed this, what the media actually does is much more than the seemingly harmless spin that is presented to us in the movie. The story of the movie doesn't really have negative consequences, except the fact that an immoral politician is elected, which seems to be always the case anyway. While in actual reality, the impact that the media has, especially on foreign policy, has horrific consequences with like millions of lives lost, billions of dollars shredded by the war machine. And in the case of Afghanistan, the destruction of the entire genetic makeup of a nation through the use of depleted uranium. So do you think the producers have been too kind in their portrayal of this mass manipulation?
Oh, I think that was very intentional. The score is so lighthearted and mellow, and the overall tone of the dialogue is almost comical. I wouldn't go all out and say that it's a comedy, though some people have. It's kind of a dark, dry humor sort of a comedy, but they're taking this really heavy, grim subject matter that has vast implications, and they're kind of, playing it in this very light tone that you get halfway into the movie and you have to stop for a second and go, wait a minute, this is serious.
Yeah.
But I think that's kind of necessary, in thrillers and action movies and, these big feeling movies, you kind of suspend your disbelief and you kind of get into fantasy mode. But with this, they managed to keep it feeling real, like these were real people. The film producer and the spin doctor, they were very genuine kind of personalities. They weren't like these big, larger-than-life, cardboard cutout military hero type characters. They were, morally questionable, but they were human. They had senses of humor. They would think things through as you and I would if we were sitting across from each other trying to plan this thing out.
It's a fantastic mix between fiction and reality because the movie has so much realism and so many truisms in it. And I think, of course, a conspiracy theorist would have a field trip with this movie. The scene when Stanley is brainstorming and right in the beginning, right after he accepts, to work on this project, and he asks, what does Albania want from us? And of course, Robert De Niro says they want our freedom. And he's like, no, fuck that. They want to destroy our way of life.
Exactly.
This is a line in a 1997 movie. And they want to destroy our way of life. These exact words were the mantra of the 2000s. So what do you think? Is this like genius script writing, predicting with accuracy the slogans of the future? Did the movie plant a seed that then grew several years later? Or did the Bush administration actually use this movie as inspirational material for their war campaign?
I think it's a line that's older than most people realize. I mean, the World War II powers were using very similar lines at the time about this, the Red Soviet menace afterwards and the Nazis beforehand. They're these demons that are out to destroy us. That, they hate Christianity, they hate apple pie, they hate your mom, like they would go all out to just scare the crap out of people.
Of course, the concept is old, but the exact words, they seem to have been right on the money there.
Yeah, I guess if it works, I mean, use it.
Yeah. And I wanted to also talk about the title, Wag the Dog. It's a very, very witty title. And the opening scenes starts with a riddle. Why does the dog wag its tail? Because the dog is smarter than the tail. If the tail were smarter, it would wag the dog. Obviously, the dog in this analogy is the American people, but who is actually the tail? Is it the mass media or is it the government?
There's a lot of ways that you could interpret that. It doesn't necessarily have to be those two things. It's sort of to suggest that intelligence grants one the right to control that which is less. Because someone isn't as bright as you, then it's the natural order that you should control them.
Oh, yeah, no, but I mean in the context of the movie, in the events and the story that actually the movie depicts, of course, the American people is the dog because that's the big mass.
Right. Yeah.
And the tail is what controls the dog. And is the tail the government or is the tail the mass media? I have a small theory, and it's just my opinion. Of course, this is art, is open to interpretation. It's not solid fact. But I think the tail is, of course, the government.
Right.
While the mass media acts as the nervous system that transmits the commands to the dog, making it wag.
Right.
In the movie, as I imagine it is also in real life, the government is the entity that stands firm and wants to stand firm. And for that, it requires the dog, or the American people, to lean towards one direction or another. The media simply submits to the desires of the government and creates the appropriate signals that will move the dog or the people in the desired direction. This is why I see them not as the tail that gives the command, but the media, but as the nervous system that carries that command and sends the required signals to the dog.
Yeah, absolutely. And then things also get complicated. In the States, for instance, right now, I mean, some people would argue that, okay, well, these media companies are, they're corporations and they have to give the people what they want, so they answer to the general public. They don't answer to the state. But then the state turns around and says, well, if you want access to our press conferences, you have to play ball.
Yeah.
So there's kind of a struggling over the power that the tail is trying to wag the dog and the dog is trying to wag his tail, and there's like a shift going back and forth between who gets to do what. So it gets kind of confusing after a while.
Well, that's I think that's actually the MO, to make it confusing.
Yeah.
There comes a time in the course of human events when a threat must be answered with courage and strength. Our forefathers earned the right to be free. Now it's time to guard their dream. Guard our American borders. American borders. Guard the American dream. Guard our right to fight for democracy. And keep our country free. Guard our American borders. Guard the American dream. Guard our right to fight for democracy. And keep our country free. Guard our American borders. Guard the American dream. Guard our right to fight for democracy. And keep our country free. Guard our American borders. Guard the American dream. Guard our right to fight for democracy. And keep our country free. Guard our American borders. Guard the American dream. Guard our right to fight for democracy. And keep our country free. Guard our American borders. Guard the American dream. Guard our right to fight for democracy. And keep our country free. Guard our American borders. Guard the American dream. Guard our right to fight for democracy. And keep our country free. Guard our American borders. Guard the American dream. Guard our right to fight for democracy. And keep our country free. Guard our American borders. Guard the American dream. Guard our right to fight for democracy. And keep our country free. Guard our American borders. Guard must keep it free. It is for life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. Free from tyranny.
I was thinking, the mass manipulation through the media slowly increased over the years with the development of new technology. First, it was the newspapers, and then it was the radio, and then the TV came along, and of course the big screen and the TV. It seemed that there was an escalation in the power to manipulate until the internet stepped into the scene.
Right.
And the internet actually gave people the choice to choose between news sources and also to become a news source themselves. I mean, I can think of the Arab Spring and pretty much every civil unrest, or even the podcasters, that transmit their thoughts and ideas from their bedroom or their living room. Media, it seems, that has gained power, but in the past decade or so, or let's say 20 years, slowly started to relinquish that power. How do you see the news scene around the world and the access to news and to actual first-hand information unfolding in the future?
Yeah, technology has this fun way of really shaking things up. I mean, if you go back to World War II, when people would look at Albert Speer and say he was this master of propaganda, look at this amazing, pageantry that he could put on, and he could brainwash people en masse. But I mean, that doesn't hold a candle compared to what Hollywood can do now. I mean, we've got propaganda nailed down to a science, and it's been perfected. But along comes the internet, and now I don't even watch TV. I haven't in 5 years, I don't think.
I'm 10, 11 years TV free.
Nice. Very nice. And yeah, I mean, the broadcasters, the cable companies, they're all freaking dying now, and everyone's going to Netflix and going to get their news from social media feeds and things like that. I mean, it's hard for the big players to keep up because they have to change their entire business model. And changing your entire business model is not something you can do at the flick of a switch, right?
Yeah, it's a transition.
And then they have to try to project trends. Like, okay, I see it's changing this way. Is it going to keep changing in that direction? And what is that going to look like 10 years from now? How do we invest in that outcome? They've definitely got their work cut out for them now.
Yeah, it does seem that the new generation does not care about TV at all. I mean, why would you when you can get... I love watching TV shows. I love watching movies, but you can get all that stuff online. And the media is left with the old generation, the grandmas and grandpas. And although on the surface, it seems that they are losing their power to manipulate, on a deeper or a closer look, those people are actually the ones that vote.
That's true.
I think unless in the next several decades, that's when we're going to see the TV is going to become like the old radio, but not anytime soon. And this is not due to a lack of power of the medium of internet to get your news, but I think it's just to habit and to the fact that old people are still attached to their TV sets.
Yeah, we've definitely got this sort of a lag of change, because like my grandparents, for instance, they'll sit in front of the TV at night and they'll fall asleep in front of it, and they're just hopelessly part of that world, and there's no way to bring them out of it. And you're right, like my generation has a lot fewer voters than theirs. We're on average much less patriotic, much less controlled by that infrastructure. So as they die off and we kind of fill in their role, I mean, I don't even know what it's going to look like. I mean, we've got this two-party kind of a system going right now, and there's a lot of wild cards that could really shake things up in terms of technology, and people's ability to travel has gotten a lot cheaper now. people are starting to look outside of their own world. They're seeing news from Russia Today. They're seeing news from Al Jazeera. They're seeing embedded reporters. They're seeing people taking footage with their phones and throwing it up on YouTube. I mean, our grandparents couldn't do that. They couldn't go online and see somebody shooting live footage on their phone from Egypt or something.
Yeah.
I just think there's a certain level of honesty that we have access to now that the previous generation had no access to.
Yeah, and that's empowering, and it brings about a lot more freedom. But coming back to the movie, I wanted to talk about the first scene and how the movie is introduced, because that's one of my favorite parts, I think. The movie starts, of course, with this little riddle, and then we are presented a short clip of the current political campaign of the president, and the clip is just horrible. It's just worse than the infomercials, that appear on the late night local TV stations. And what is their slogan? The slogan is never change horses in midstream. Keep America working.
Right.
And next, De Niro enters the scene, and he's introduced as Mr. Fix-It. He meets the staff, an emergency. And in this meeting, I think we're given a taste of how the media can create misinformation and manipulate with words. And of course, Robert De Niro, his character, needs to buy some time to bury the presidential sex scandal. So he asks that the president extends his visit to China one more day. And then he schools the press team by giving them an example of a spin.
Yes.
And this, I think, is brilliant. He goes, why is the president in China? Trade relations. You're goddamn right. And it's got nothing to do with a B-3 bomber. There is no B-3 bomber. I just said that. There is no B-3 bomber. And I don't know why these rumors get started. This exchange sounds really familiar to what we see on TV. And although, this example seems a bit too obvious, how close to the actual reality do you think this scene lands?
I don't know. I mean, we have no way of knowing. Because, I mean, there's a few scenes later where the press secretary has his speech going, and Robert picks up his phone and calls the agent that's in that room with the press secretary and says, make him say this phrase. And he says it right there. And it's like, is that accurate? I mean, probably. I don't see why not. And then how easy it is once one of the journalists in the crowd gets on a certain train of thought, the rest follow, right? So what's the deal with this secret B-3 bomber, right? And, one journalist asks that, and then the rest of them go, yeah, what is up with that,
Yeah, and that scene that you're talking about when, of course, they're at Dustin Hoffman's house, I think that presents how power attracts the narcissist in such a wonderful way. Because it is power that is the lure that, Mr. Fix-It uses to reel in Stanley Motz, the Hollywood producer played by Dustin Hoffman. And, this guy has everything, money, fame, he's got social status. He's not interested in helping in the beginning. However, he cannot resist power. De Niro shows up at his house and convinces him to join, not by promising money, but by showing him what kind of power and control will he have over the public opinion. And in that White House press conference that you mentioned, when it starts, there's that scene with Dustin Hoffman just enjoying it. The press conference is introduced as a sex scandal, and he's like, "Ooh, this guy's fucked," and he has no interest in this matter at all. But however, as soon as the question suddenly turned from the sexual allegations to the alleged tensions in Albania and the issue of the, imagined B-3 bomber, Stanley starts to give Mr. Fix-It more inquisitive and more interested looks. And he's like, how close are you to this thing? Well, what do you want the kid to say? And of course, then he makes the kid. And by the way, he calls the White House spokesperson the kid.
Yeah.
And I really like how Wag the Dog depicts in this scene the irresistible attraction of narcissists to power when, the game is played at such high levels. It is indeed power, not money, that it seems to attract the sociopaths of this world.
Yeah, and also it was a specific kind of power. Like, he wasn't interested in becoming an ambassador or anything like that. He wanted the power to do what he does at a higher level than he had ever been able to. Because a film producer is essentially a storyteller, and he's been doing that his whole life. And now he gets the opportunity to play with funding that he never had access to before. He gets to play on a stage that he never had access to.
Mm-hmm.
He gets to tell the kind of story that other film producers never actually get to do. So it's that being part of something bigger, being part of something grand and special that really attracted him to that.
Yeah, and of course, in the end, he dies. I mean, his love of recognition and, you know, taking credit is what actually kills him.
Spoiler alert.
All our listeners are pretty much prepared to have the movie spoiled for them. I don't think we need to actually warn them. This is all we do. We spoil the movies.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, he's not interested in money. He's not interested in anything else. He just wants the credit.
Yeah.
And that is the perfect portrait of a sociopath and of a narcissist.
Yep.
So what about the music? Willie Nelson is I love Willie Nelson. He's playing I think Johnny Dean is his name, and he's the musician brought in to create the soundtrack of the war.
Right. It's funny because, I mean, he's got the spotlight on him as being the music, but all throughout the movie there's Mark Knopfler from Dire Straits that did the score, and that, you know, sonic landscape throughout the whole film really set this tone that was never really obvious. Like it's never something that's in your face, but it keeps things very light and paced. And then when they drop Willie in, he's like this big splash, you know. It's like, okay, now all of a sudden we got the crazy cowboy in there, and he's gonna drum up
the crazy pothead.
Yeah, totally. The stoner that's gonna come up with the theme songs.
Yeah.
And I think it really worked too, because the crazy cowboy stoner, he goes in there and the final product doesn't look or sound like it came from a crazy cowboy stoner. Like they had the choir in there and everything.
The American Dream.
Yeah, it was like the most, you know, it was the cheesiest, most horrible song I've ever heard in my life, but
it fit the narrative just fine, and it reminded me, you know, of the production of We Are the World. Of course, they were trying to reproduce that.
Yes.
And it's really music seems to be really important in provoking an emotional response. And while the narrative changes, you know, Willie Nelson's character has to literally change the tune and change the song. And he starts with the first song entitled, of course, The American Dream. Then they go to the second one, Good Old Shoe, which is a blues meant to touch the deepest emotional chord in the American people. And then, you know, the war song, The Man of the 303. But I think the soundtrack of the movie actually got a lot more credit, although you don't really notice it in the movie. As far as I've read, none of the songs that Willie Nelson, well, the character of Willie Nelson wrote in the movie are included in the soundtrack.
Really?
Yeah. So he didn't get a lot of credit for that.
Bummer.
But he's just hilarious, you know, when he just doesn't give a shit about anything. He is asked to change the song over and over again, and he's like, I was just on my way to get drunk.
Yes.
The music fit the narrative very, very well.
Oh, totally. Yeah, and it really helped with the pacing, because it's the sort of subject matter that, because there's no big chase scenes and no bombs going off and stuff, you know, a lot, especially if the audience is a bit younger, they get kind of bored at a certain spot. It helps to have that pacing to kind of just keep pulling the person through gently, you know. And I think the music really achieved that.
Yeah. And also the movie has, it holds several truisms because it's so blended with actual reality. And it's got of course, the symbolism of the war in that scene where De Niro explaining war to Hoffman. He says, we remember the slogans and we can't even remember the fucking wars.
Yes.
Naked girl covered in napalm, V for victory, 5 Marines raising the flag. You'll remember the picture 50 years from now, he says, but you have forgotten the war. War is show business. And this is not fiction at all. It seems very accurate.
I think that line just sums up the whole film.
Yeah. I really liked when he was talking about declaring war versus going to war.
Yeah.
they're going out of that the producer's house, and he says the president is going to war with Albania in about 30 minutes. And Dennis Leary, of course, asks, we're declaring war in Albania? No, we're not declaring war. We're going to war. We haven't declared war since the Second World War. And this was 1997. The voices against government corruption were not really that loud back then.
Yeah, I mean, in that time, there were a lot of veterans coming home from Iraq, and they didn't have smartphones, they didn't have Facebook, they didn't have Twitter. They were out there, but they didn't really have a voice. Now, when a soldier, they don't even have to come home. They can still be over there and still get word out. Like, it's changed a lot.
Yeah. One of my favorite scenes are the actress playing the distressed girl running with a white kitten in her arms, and also the scene where the guy gives them a ride from the plane crash, and the advisor, I think she's an advisor, Anne Hesh, she's always making sure, that the president does not employ illegal immigrants.
Right.
Because no matter how big the lie and the corruption, details like the president employing an illegal immigrant are much, much more important. It seems that the movie shows the corruption and the complete irrationality of American politics and of politics in general in a very, very witty way.
Yeah. Just a side note, the girl who played that role of the kid that was supposedly in Albania, that was Kirsten Dunst. And she was in the opening credits, but it seemed weird to me because back then she wasn't a famous actress by any stretch. Like, she hadn't done very much yet. And Woody Harrelson wasn't in the credits whatsoever. They kept him out until the very end, even though he had way more screen time.
Yeah, I didn't even notice he wasn't in the credits. I mean, it's Woody Harrelson, and he did such a fantastic job playing that, the made-up war hero who turned out to be a non-rapist, mentally ill patient.
Yeah, and that was it. Is like, they needed, for their story, they needed this war hero, but the actual guy that they got to play that role wasn't anything even close to a war hero. And, I guess the point is that the actual person doesn't matter. All that matters is what the actual people see on TV, right?
Yeah, facts don't matter. It matters how you spin them. And I really like how, of course, Dustin Hoffman, the Hollywood producers, every time they encounter some problem, this is nothing. This is nothing. Their plane crashes. This is nothing. Their hero turns out to be maniac and a criminal. This is nothing. Like, he's seen them all. He's in his producing career, he has experienced much worse.
Well, I have a bit of a confession to make here. It's that line that made me love this film so much. Even now, like, whenever I'm doing something or halfway into a project and things start to go wrong and there's damage control to be done, it's Dustin Hoffman in my head going, "This is nothing. This is nothing."
Also, you actually picked that line as a motivational kind of meme that you use. That's quite interesting. I'm gonna try that to see if it works.
It totally does.
Well, I had a lot of fun watching the movie and even more fun discussing it with Gabriel. I don't really know why, but I never got around to watching Wag the Dog until just a few days ago. I'm really glad that Gabriel suggested it for the Philosophy Film Club and that he brought it to my attention. If you haven't watched it yet, and if our spoilers were not a big turnoff for you, I strongly recommend watching this movie. This is a black comedy film that I would place right on the border where fiction and reality meet. And because of this, it is guaranteed to deliver quite a peculiar experience. The acting is fantastic, but who can expect anything less from a cast so rich with high-quality Hollywood names? If you already watched the movie back when it came out, then watch it again. I bet you will view it in a very different way today. After all, we've had almost 20 years of escalating war propaganda from the brainwashing machine commonly known as the media since its release. Although almost 2 decades have passed, this movie seems to become less and less fiction and much more closer to reality as time goes by. Also, I'm gonna go on a limb here and say that I bet your awareness of the connection between the state and the media has increased substantially since this movie came out, and you will be guaranteed a much different experience should you decide to watch it again. Many thanks to Gabriel for taking the time for this chat, and many thanks to you, the listeners, for letting us borrow your ears and your time. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to give us a like, drop a comment below, and if you want to keep up with future content from the PFC, please join us on Google+ and in our Facebook group where we will keep the conversation going. There will be more movies to come, so stick around. I'll see you all next time.
We're gathered here with a cross to bear, the bravest men anywhere, that this great land will remain free. God bless the men of the 303. Side by side, we know no fear. Our minds are sharp, our eyes are clear. In the air, on land, or on the sea, we're the fighting men of the 303. 303. Years from now, when we are gone.